A skull adorned with long hair was impaled on a pike, a grim trophy of a forgotten battle. In front of a blood-spattered castle gate, a formal declaration was posted. It announced that since Troyven had failed to appeal, war was officially declared. Inside the Nine Dragons Council Chamber, the remaining leaders discussed the situation. It was clear the Troyvens had been preparing for this, as warlords in the north were already making suspicious moves. One dragon scoffed, claiming a rabble gathering made no difference, but another pointed to the empty seat at their table, questioning his levity. The conversation shifted to the matter of succession, which couldn't be delayed forever, though one member felt it was too soon to discuss. Robert Ragnar, the Black Dragon, countered that it was the perfect time, arguing that a conflict among the heirs just before a war would be disastrous. Another dragon accused him of blasphemy, but Robert coolly stated that variables must be minimized. A pale hand rose, silencing the bickering. Osa Ragnar, the Plum Blossom Dragon, declared that a proper gathering of all concerned was needed, and she would see to it. She then mentioned a suitable event was coming up. They would all decide after seeing things for themselves. Meanwhile, in a candlelit chamber, a blindfolded Theo trained relentlessly, his body slick with sweat. His muscles screamed with exertion. He snuffed out a candle flame with a flick of his sword, then moved with impossible speed, extinguishing dozens more in a blur of motion. He whispered a name, Yura, a ghost from his past. He remembered her voice urging him to kill and take everything. She had told him to steal whatever he desired. His blade danced, the candles falling around him. He paused, catching his breath, his scarred chest heaving. A voice beside him asked if it was still weighing on him. Guardian Dragon Lodbrok appeared, identifying the burden as the lingering grudge of the mad Dragon Emperor. Theo admitted that even after all this time, the grudge from the half-sword still tried to interfere with him. It wasn't unbearable yet, but the fact that it belonged to the mad Dragon Emperor bothered him. Still, he acknowledged that it allowed him to glimpse the Emperor's realm. It was a name he could not forget. He recalled that the Emperor was the one who had stolen Lodbrok's heart. Lodbrok acknowledged this, which only deepened Theo's conflict over why she had entrusted him with the sword. She warned him not to be impatient, lest he face something beyond his abilities again. She then asked if his severed arm had fully healed. He confirmed it had, thanks to the High Priest's immediate treatment. He cheekily asked if she was worried about him, which earned him a silent, unamused stare. She noted he was healed and told him to go, as someone else was looking for him. She also told him to stop messing up her nest, complaining that one makes a mess and another has to clean. Theo had no excuse. He found himself back at the Camellia Palace. A wax-sealed envelope sat on his desk. He realized who had been looking for him. His attendant, Carl, asked what he'd said, but Theo brushed it off as talking to himself. Carl confirmed it was an invitation. It was for a banquet at the Daffodil Palace to celebrate Lady Ray Ragnar's 18th birthday. Carl questioned the timing of such a grand affair with war on their doorstep. Theo corrected him, stating that precisely because it was a time of turmoil, it must be grand. He explained that Troyven's betrayal had thrown Ragnar's internal balance into upheaval. Instead of Axion, he had become the sixth successor. To make matters worse, one of the 9 dragons had lost his seat due to Ed's treason. This banquet wasn't just a birthday party. It was a political stage to show Ragnar's strength and for the successors and dragons to size each other up. Carl, impressed, praised his brilliance. He then asked if Theo would be attending, to which he answered yes. If they were so eager to see him, he must attend. The Daffodil Palace was an opulent, sprawling estate. Inside, the grand ballroom was filled with nobles and warriors. Murmurs spread as the new heir's arrival was noted. Young Lord Theo Ragnar, an announcer called out as he made his entrance. As expected, all eyes were on him. The party was just a pretext to see the new player on the board. He knew he had to leave a strong impression. A voice remarked that he couldn't sit still and had caused quite a stir. A clean-shaven Naven Bacchus greeted him, saying he had been waiting. Theo teased him, saying he almost didn't recognize him without the beard. Naven stammered that his wedding day had been too hectic. The surrounding nobles whispered amongst themselves, recognizing Naven as the sole survivor of the Bacchus Purge and now the head of a pillar family. Theo smirked, telling Naven that thanks to his timely appearance, they had set the mood. Now, the important part began. A man approached, identifying him as Theo Ragnar. The air crackled with tension between them. The man introduced himself as the fifth successor. Theo had expected him to approach sooner. I am Thorkel Ragnar, commander of the Black Iron Cavalry. The two successors stood face to face. The crowd watched with bated breath as they finally met. The former leading heir and the newly risen successor, telling Theo not to be so guarded. He was glad the new heir wasn't the childish Axion and complimented Theo's exemplary impression. However, he continued, in a clan where only the strong were respected, he wondered if they could truly welcome a rival with joy. The two shook hands, a silent challenge passing between them. Theo formally introduced himself, and Thorkel laughed at the line he drew. A wave of red energy washed over Theo. Thorkel's aura flared, a palpable force of power. He dismissed Theo's formality, telling him to be at ease and call him brother. This, Thorkel declared, was more like a Ragnar. Naven watched, sensing the shift in power. Theo's own blue aura flared to life. Since he was told to be comfortable, he would indeed call him brother. Within the opulent Daffodil Palace, chandeliers dripped with light. Not all guests, however, were comfortable in the finery. One man from the rank of family complained loudly about his restrictive suit, earning a sharp rebuke from his companion for reinforcing their family's barbaric reputation. Meanwhile, other nobles arrived, noting the hall was already bustling. A charismatic man with white hair was greeted warmly, with whispers that he was giving the ascendant dragon a run for his money in the West. He politely deflected the rumors and then asked if anyone had seen Lord Theo, a question that caused a sudden tension in the air. He had unknowingly asked after arrival in front of Lord Ray, the supposed star of the evening, and quickly offered an apology. Ray, swirling a glass of wine, seemed unconcerned. Suddenly, a wave of immense red power erupted from the center of the hall, met by an equally potent surge of blue energy. All eyes turned to the source. It could only be Lord Theo. He and Thorkel were locked in a handshake, a silent battle of wills raging between them. Thorkel's faint smile never wavered as their auras swirled into a powerful vortex. With a hearty laugh, Thorkel yielded, admitting he was no match. Theo graciously replied that his brother had let him win. Thorkel did not deny it, accepting a glass of wine from a passing servant. He offered sincere praise, admitting that if he had fought Theo at the same age, he would have undoubtedly lost. Theo accepted the high compliment. Thorkel smiled, declaring how joyful he was to have such a magnificent younger brother. He then raised his glass high, proposing a toast to the new Ragnar. The entire hall joined in. Thorkel asked Theo if it was a good debut, and Theo simply thanked him. Theo understood the game perfectly. Thorkel had demonstrated his own power, then solidified his position by magnanimously acknowledging a rival, winning the crowd's favor. The atmosphere, which Theo had carefully controlled, now belonged entirely to Thorkel. The man was far more cunning than his sociable exterior suggested. The surrounding nobles now buzzed with excitement over Theo's potential, with mothers already sizing him up for their daughters. He had instantly become the realm's most eligible bachelor, a title he'd likely find more annoying than a tax audit. From a balcony above, an old man with a grizzled beard and an eye patch clenched his fist. He had planned to use the half-breed's behavior to have him thrown out, but Thorkel's interference had ruined his plan. The sight of a mere bastard stirring up family affairs turned his stomach. His gaze drifted outside, settling on two figures on a snowy terrace. It was Evelyn, sharing a laugh with a friend. The old man's face contorted in rage. He couldn't believe she dared to show her face here. Outside, Evelyn's companion, Aaron, was admiring her dress, telling her she looked amazing. Aaron insisted it wasn't empty flattery. Evelyn looked both pretty and cute. The last word made Evelyn blush furiously. Flustered, She declared she was changing back into her uniform. But then a chilling presence washed over her, and a familiar sickness churned in her gut. The old man stepped out of the venue. His voice was a low growl as he asked why she had crawled out here. Erin was stunned and tried to protest the unfair treatment, but Evelyn quickly stopped her, insisting she was fine. Trembling, she begged her friend not to interfere, her voice cracking with desperation. Erin stared, horrified, wondering what history existed between her fearless team leader and this monster. The Prime Dragon stepped forward, reminding Evelyn that he had ordered her never to appear before him again. His gaze fell on her prosthetic arm, his lip curling in disgust. Erin gasped, recognizing the fearsome Prime Dragon. With a sudden, violent motion, he shattered the prosthetic. He sneered, asking if she thought a mere toy could erase the past. He told her that trash should live like trash, crushed on the floor. He gave a final, chilling warning. The next time she appeared before him, he would tear her to shreds. The Prime Dragon laughed, remarking that the stench was finally starting to fade. Erin furiously threatened to report him to the Office of Law. He found her threat amusing, telling her to do as she pleased. He promised she was about to learn the true meaning of Ragnar's survival of the fittest before disappearing into the night. Evelyn wept on the cold stone, believing she never should have come. The memory of her childhood resurfaced. The day she had pleaded with her father, only for him to furiously threaten her for using that title. He had screamed at her to get lost and never appear before him again, leaving her to collapse in despair. In the end, nothing had changed at all. Her sobs were quiet, broken things. A voice cut through her grief. It was Commander Julius. He asked where she was rushing off to, pointing out that the banquet was in the other direction. Evelyn could only look up, tears streaming down her face. Back in the now lively banquet hall, Theo was still mingling. The festive mood was shattered by a furious roar that shook the very foundations of the palace. The Prime Dragon stood there, his face a mask of rage, screaming at Julius Ragnar. The crowd watched in terror as he accused the captain of the White Dragon Squad of interfering. The Prime Dragon's roar of fury echoed through the banquet hall, his rage directed entirely at Julius Ragnar. He was stopped mid-lunge, his wrist caught in Julius's unyielding grip. Julius reminded the old man of a promise made long ago, that he would make him the same. Wolfgang accused him of treason, ordering his men to seize the dangerous criminal at once. Before they could move, a dozen blades flashed into view, encircling Julius. The Law Council had arrived. They formally announced that Julius was to be detained for injuring an elder. Julius met their gaze, his one eye glowing with defiance, and asked what would happen if he refused. The councilman hesitated, taken aback by his audacity. In that tense silence, Julius recalled an oath sworn upon his sword 4 years prior, a promise made before those very elders. He had sworn to protect that child, Evelyn, and had warned Wolfgang that if he ever touched her again, he would inflict the same fate upon him. The crowd erupted in panicked whispers. The demon dragon had broken the elder dragon's arm. This was unprecedented. Theo watched the chaos unfold, a knot tightening in his stomach. This event had never occurred in his past life, and his eyes darted around, searching for the cause. His gaze fell on Evelyn, and everything clicked into place. He remembered her story. Evelyn Nareville was the illegitimate child of Wolfgang Ragnar, a man obsessed with pure blood. Her existence was a shame he desperately tried to hide. He had planned to cast her out, but Julius, seeing her potential, intervened and brought her into the White Dragon Squad. When she rose to prominence, Wolfgang, fearing exposure, tried to kill her under the guise of an accident. She survived, but lost her arm, forcing her into a quiet retirement where she was ignorant of such high society affairs. This entire incident was a direct result of his own actions of bringing her back into the fold. If he had caused this, then it was his duty to set things straight. Wolfgang, clutching his broken arm, began to sway the crowd, decrying the demon dragon's contempt for the elders. He accused Julius of using his authority to threaten kin, calling it outright treason. Julius snarled back, finding it ironic that Wolfgang of all people would speak of abusing authority. A calm voice cut through the tension. It was Theo. He lamented that their quarrel had filled a joyful banquet with fear. Both men glared at him. But Theo continued, suggesting they end this with Ragnar's long-standing tradition, a dual trial. Wolfgang immediately rejected the idea, insisting the blame lay solely with Julius. Theo agreed, but pointed out that they could not let the disturbance escalate. Suddenly, the floor beneath their feet began to freeze over. A woman with an aura of biting cold approached, demanding to know what they were doing at her daughter's birthday celebration. It was the ice dragon, Neil Ragnar Tun, Lord of the Daffodil Palace. Wolfgang tried to plead his case, but she silenced him, stating she cared nothing for petty squabbles. She agreed with the boy's suggestion to settle it quickly, declaring the duel the final mercy her patience would allow. The nobles murmured amongst themselves. A dual trial heavily favored the elders, but Wolfgang's side saw no disadvantage. The rule was simple. Plaintiff and defendant would fight in the final round, while representatives fought the first two. Wolfgang glanced at his opponent's potential champions, a one-armed cripple and a wretched bastard child. A cruel smile spread across his face. He was certain the duel would end in the first two matches. From the crowd, Thorkel watched with a faint, amused smile. He admitted to himself that this was more than he had expected from Theo. Knowing the demon dragon's temper, the situation was bound to spiral, and without Theo's intervention, the elder dragon would have ruined Julius politically. In a fleeting moment, Theo had found a solution all sides could accept. This, Thorkel thought, could be entertaining to watch. Under the supervision of the Law Council, the dual trial was set to begin. To ensure fairness, no mana was permitted, and all actions were protected by Ragnar's laws. The council asked if both parties swore to hold no resentment or seek revenge. Both Julius and Wolfgang swore the oath. The first combatants were called forward. To everyone's surprise, Theo stepped into the arena. His allies watched with concern, warning him that his opponent was no easy mark. He was facing Gale Sword Beta, the Elder Dragon's aide and one of the most skilled inspectors in the clan. As Beta prepared, Wolfgang leaned in and gave a quiet order. Do not hold back any killing blows. He reminded his aide that anything happening in a duel trial was absolved. At the very least, he wanted an arm brought back to him. Across the snowy arena, Julius asked Theo if he was truly all right with this. Julius apologized for dragging him into his mess, but Theo cut him off. He explained that while a representative could fight multiple matches, his true intention was to use this duel to resolve a long-standing grievance between Julius and Evelyn once and for all. With that, he drew his sword, ready for the battle to commence. Under the glow of ornate lampposts, Theo entered the dueling arena. A sharp whistle from the council signaled the start of the match. Beta, the Gale Sword, drew his own blade and lunged forward. Their swords clashed in a flurry of sparks, the force of their blows echoing through the night. Theo was pushed back, sliding across the icy ground, but he quickly regained his footing and charged again. Beta was shocked that he wasn't overwhelming the younger man, marveling at the power difference of a true successor. Still, he saw an opening, a sign of Theo's inexperience. For the sake of the successor's dignity, Beta decided to end it quickly and painlessly. He thrust his sword forward, but as he closed in, he realized Theo had left the gap open on purpose. In a blur of motion, Theo sidestepped the attack and put distance between them. Beta froze, a cold sweat breaking out on his brow. If Theo hadn't stopped, he would be dead. He couldn't comprehend why his opponent had shown mercy. Theo clutched his head as a dark voice whispered in his mind, urging him to kill those who had mocked and abandoned him. The whispers grew louder, chanting for blood. He fought to regain control, but the opening he left was clear. Beta saw it as a trick, a foolish attempt to underestimate him, and he vowed to turn the counter back on Theo. Their swords met again. Theo, meanwhile, was fighting a battle on two fronts. He silenced the voice in his head, insisting he would handle it himself. The sudden shift in his aura caught Beta off guard. With a surge of newfound clarity, Theo's blade slammed into Beta's, the impact sending a shockwave through the arena. A massive fissure of dark energy tore through the ground. The ice dragon watched with a flicker of approval in her eyes, raising a hand to shield herself from the blast. She was impressed that he could wield such power without mana, a testament to his outstanding skill. Beta was sent flying, crashing to the ground in a battered heap. The councilman stood in stunned silence before finally declaring Theo the victor of the first round. A dark aura swirled around the young successor, his eyes glowing with red light. Theo reflected on the strange sensation he had felt. It was as if something was guiding him, allowing him to unleash a completely different level of power. The idea of entrusting himself to the grudges was dangerous, but if he could master it, he could become twice as strong. The councilman announced the second round. Theo, to the shock of many, declared he would continue fighting. Wolfgang sneered, calling him an arrogant bastard and vowing to kill him this time. A new challenger stepped into the arena. It was Paige Grayson, the former Dragon Gate Swordmaster, known as the Sword of Mystics. The crowd buzzed with excitement. They couldn't believe Grayson could wield such a massive blade without mana. Theo's friends expressed their concern, but one of them pointed out the grim reality. Unlike the first round, where Wolfgang had sent a subordinate to save face, he had now sent an elder. This meant he fully intended to kill Theo. The two fighters faced each other across the cracked arena. The councilman blew the whistle. Theo immediately put down his sword and yielded. Wolfgang was speechless. Theo calmly explained that a mid-ranked examiner like himself, who was a student not a teacher, could never hope to match an esteemed elder. With a theatrical bow, he dropped his sword, the clatter echoing the shattering of Wolfgang's pride. The council had no choice but to declare Paige Grayson the winner of the second round. The crowd erupted. They praised Theo's strategic mind, realizing he had sacrificed the round to completely humiliate the council. Wolfgang trembled with fury, wondering if the bastard had predicted everything this far in advance. Even Evelyn had never seen him so shaken. Julius apologized to Theo for getting him involved, but Theo waved it off, saying it was natural for comrades to help each other. He then turned to Evelyn, his words echoing in her memory. Julius inviting her to the cavalry, urging her to hold those responsible accountable, and Theo asking her to be his sword. He told them both that he planned to fulfill their long-standing wishes. Evelyn was touched by how much they both cared for her, realizing she couldn't stay trapped in her past. She approached the council, declaring that she had something to say. The final round was announced, and Wolfgang prepared to face Julius, vowing to take his arm even if it cost him his life. But the councilman's next words stopped him in his tracks. The defense had requested a change of fighter. Evelyn Nereville stepped into the arena. Wolfgang laughed, calling it absurd and reckless. But Evelyn's voice was firm as she faced him, telling him he was the one who should be begging. With a voice filled with newfound strength, she looked her father in the eye and addressed him by the title he had forbidden her from using. The word hung in the air, a final, defiant blow that left Wolfgang utterly stunned. The crowd erupted into a flurry of whispers as Evelyn's declaration hung in the air. Rumors of Wolfgang's infidelity, once dismissed, now seemed plausible. Wolfgang denied her claim, calling it nonsense. Evelyn met his gaze with a cold smile, remarking that she should have called him father sooner if she had known how pleased he would be. She then proceeded to air all of his dirty laundry, recounting how he had nearly beaten her to death for calling him father as a child and later tried to have her killed to hide a secret. Wolfgang roared at her to be silent, but his outburst was cut short by a pained gasp. The crowd, now convinced of his hypocrisy, openly mocked him. Even his fellow elders began to turn on him, questioning why he hadn't dealt with his illegitimate daughter sooner. Wolfgang could only grit his teeth in frustration. On the sidelines, Julius tried to intervene, but Theo stopped him, telling him to trust in Evelyn's resolve. Back in the arena, the duel began. Wolfgang charged forward, his blade meeting Evelyn's in a clash of steel. A brilliant turquoise light enveloped her. Julius watched in amazement, recognizing the legendary wind thunder god technique. The elders, too, were stunned, identifying it as the lost sword art of the Windstorm clan. They couldn't fathom how Evelyn could have mastered such a powerful and forgotten technique. A vortex of wind and energy erupted from her blade, pushing Wolfgang back. The crowd was in awe. She was not only holding her own, but overpowering a top-tier swordsman. Theo watched with a knowing smile. Without the use of mana, magical power meant nothing. This duel was a contest of pure swordsmanship, and Wolfgang, who had relied on his pure-blood lineage to rise through the ranks, was no match for Evelyn's raw talent. Enraged, Wolfgang pressed his attack, but Evelyn met him blow for blow, her face a mask of determination. Even as she grunted with effort, their blades remained locked. Wolfgang warned her that she couldn't escape his grasp, but she retorted that she would beat him until he came to his senses and begged for mercy. The force of their locked blades intensified. With a final, defiant cry, she dared him to try her. His eyes widened in disbelief. She explained that while he had once been her entire world, a figure she feared, she now had people she could trust, people who believed in her completely. She was no longer the weak, scared child who clung to him for validation. The reflection in his monocle showed not a victim, but a warrior reborn. With a powerful surge, she broke the stalemate, sending Wolfgang tumbling to the ground. She declared that she was no longer a weak child. The crowd stared in stunned silence as Evelyn stood victorious, having defeated the formidable Wolfgang. He tried to rise, insisting the duel wasn't over, but a wall of ice shot up from the ground, blocking his path. He turned in fury, but the ice dragon's voice cut through his anger. She told him to stop disgracing the 9 dragons and accept the result. The council declared Evelyn the victor of the 3rd round, and the verdict was announced, not guilty. As Evelyn walked away, she reported back to her commander and her lord, a radiant smile on her face. They both praised her for her courage. She looked at them, her heart full of gratitude, telling them it was all thanks to them. Meanwhile, Wolfgang's allies rushed to his side, helping him to his feet. He brushed them off, his eyes burning with hatred, and lunged forward again, screaming Evelyn's name. He vowed to kill her himself, but his attack was intercepted. He looked up in fury to see Julius standing in his way. The demon dragon's voice was low and menacing as he asked Wolfgang if he wanted to lose his other arm too. Before the confrontation could escalate further, a commotion broke out at the edge of the arena. A messenger arrived, announcing that the Troivan family had begun their invasion. Julius clenched his jaw and ordered Theo and Evelyn to return to the White Dragon Squad at once. Wolfgang cursed under his breath, trying to stop them, insisting the duel wasn't over. But the Ice Dragon's voice stopped him cold. With a gesture, she summoned a forest of ice swords from the ground, warning him not to bring any more shame upon the 9 dragons. Wolfgang accused her of ignoring him and the entire Elder Council. She replied that the head of the family's view likely didn't differ much from her own. The other elders, their honor already in tatters, could not support a representative who refused to accept defeat. Defeated and utterly humiliated, Wolfgang collapsed. Julius looked on, a sense of finality settling over him. Far away, under a full moon, Ed Troivan sat on a throne, a smirk playing on his lips. A subordinate reported that they had successfully occupied the central plateau and that Castle Harmon would soon fall. When asked about the Ragnar forces, the subordinate explained that they were all gathering at the plateau. Troivan laughed, calling them fools for moving exactly as he had predicted. This war, he mused, was just one small piece of a much grander plan. While they focused their forces on the central plateau, he would devour his true target, a place far more valuable. In the Bacchus family territory, guards complained about their new lord. Since taking over, Naven had done nothing but lock himself away and drink, a disappointment in such turbulent times. Everyone of worth had left, leaving only debts behind. To them, a new family head who could afford to drown himself in drink was a blessing in itself. When one guard mentioned the Ragnar reinforcements, another scoffed, calling them useless freeloaders. He claimed that every time he checked on them, they were passed out drunk. It seemed like Ragnar's way of politely telling them to get lost. Little did they know, their conversation was being overheard. In a nearby forest, a hooded figure reported to his commander that morale in the castle was at rock bottom, confirming their operation was a success. The commander rallied his troops, ordering them to finish the job quickly. Back on the castle walls, one of the Ragnar freeloaders snored loudly. An assassin crept up on him, mocking the drunkard's luck. He raised his dagger, telling the sleeping guard to drink the rest in hell. Meanwhile, Theo requested independent operation rights from Julius. When Julius denied him, Theo presented a report. Julius was skeptical, but Theo insisted the contents were true. He explained that Troiven's main invasion points were merely a diversion. Their real targets were the floating archipelago and the Bacchus territory. Julius conceded it was a sound assessment. Theo elaborated, pointing out that the Black Skull mercenaries, who were in league with Troiven, originated from the floating archipelago's maritime league. This connection explained Troiven's vast war funds, as the archipelago was once the hub of the Empire's wealth. Its geographical position also made it a direct threat. Therefore, their top priority should be fortifying the neglected Bacchus territory. Julius argued that they had no manpower to spare, as their troops were already deployed to counter the main invasion force. Theo countered that this was precisely why he needed independent command authority. He intended to see it through himself. Julius, realizing this had been Theo's plan all along, approved the request, but warned him not to overextend himself. As Theo left, Julius examined the highly classified information he had provided. The fact that Theo had shared it with him, and not the intelligence expert Black Dragon, meant he intended to act personally, and the permission was merely a formality. Julius couldn't help but smile. He knew Theo had already made his move. Back at Bacchus Castle, the assassin was hit by a spray of liquid. He recoiled in shock, realizing it was only orange juice. The drunk guard grinned, cheerfully announcing that he didn't actually drink. With a swift movement, he dispatched the assassin, the sound of the kill echoing in the night. The guard, whose name was Sybil Dre, was actually one of Theo's elite soldiers. His men reported that the vanguard had been cleared out, and he ordered them to light the beacon. They marveled at how far they had come since the blooming ceremony, now able to take on Troiven's forces. As the beacon was lit, another assassin lunged at Sybil. All three soldiers reacted instantly, but before they could strike, the assassin was cut down. Naven stood over the fallen enemy, casually chiding his men for their carelessness. Sybil, flustered, asked if they should begin. Naven just laughed, telling him to relax. He then added that if he truly wanted to relax, he had a small task for him first. He asked Sybil to light the fire for them, as they had something to discuss with their peers. Naven's smile was unsettlingly calm. Sybil, terrified, quickly agreed to do it himself. The beacon flared to life, and archers lined the castle walls, their bows ready. Naven stepped onto the parapet, a confident smile on his face. He wondered just how much his lord had seen through. Below, a massive army of Troiven's forces had gathered. He marveled at his lord's foresight. A cry went up from the castle walls. Troiven's rats are invading. The Bacchus soldiers, their morale restored, roared back, ready to defend their home. The battle began. From the skies above, Theo arrived on his wyvern, Umbra, observing that the battle had already begun. He smiled, a fierce light in his eyes. He was about to see some familiar faces again. The sun rose over the Bacchus territory, casting a rainbow across the sky. A commander reported from the castle walls, announcing the successful defense of the territory. Theo told him to lower his voice, then commended him for a job well done. The commander was overwhelmed, tears streaming down his face at the acknowledgement. Naven Bacchus joined Theo on the rampart, surprised to see him in person. Theo noted that his help seemed unnecessary. Naven gave credit to the soldiers Theo had provided. Theo explained they were former Camellia Palace guards who had wanted to serve him. He was pleased they had earned Naven's approval. Naven admitted he hadn't expected much from him at first, but after a few days, he realized he could trust them. Hearing this made Theo proud. With that, Theo made a request. Now that the Bacchus family's night order was vacant, he proposed that Naven train Theo's men to become the new order. Naven considered the idea of a new night order, a spark of anticipation in his eyes. Theo smiled, knowing he had his man. He confirmed he was counting on Naven and turned to leave. This was just a stop, as Theo had another purpose. He was heading to investigate the floating archipelago. Naven was stunned by his lord's boldness, noting the place was notoriously hostile to outsiders. Theo simply replied that he had his ways. His journey took him to the bustling port city of Dion. He entered a rowdy tavern, the scent of ale and sweat thick in the air. He bumped into a large man who aggressively accused him of not watching where he was going. Theo sarcastically apologized for not seeing him way up there. The brute promised to lower himself to Theo's eye level, his face contorting in rage. The tavern erupted into a full-blown brawl. A barmaid rushed past with mugs of ale, trying to keep up with the chaos. In a quiet room upstairs, a very different kind of tension was brewing. An official was summarizing a request. The floating archipelago was to offer gunpowder and steel to Troyven as tribute. Antonio Spinola, the next head of the family, slammed his fist on the table. He raged that this was not a request, but a threat. To be forced to pay a rental fee for their own stolen treasure was a joke. A cruel, infuriating joke. Still, he knew they had no choice. Without the dragon sword, the floating archipelago would sink. He cursed their fate, wishing they had never lost the sword in the first place. He slumped in his chair, wondering if there was any hope left for his people as his aide looked on with concern. Downstairs, the brawl was in full swing, with someone shouting encouragement to smash a man with a chair. The large brute kicked over a table in frustration. He yelled at the patrons to drink quietly. From the shadows, Theo noted that his target had finally shown himself. The brawler was none other than Antonio Spinola. Later, in the private room, Antonio's guard stood watch. He questioned the cloaked stranger before him. Theo confirmed his request to join the crew as a combatant, citing the recent sea monster attacks and his proven skill in the tavern brawl. Antonio agreed they were looking for crew, but he flatly refused to let Theo on his ship. Antonio pointed out the inconsistencies. Theo's gear was too clean, the fight was too convenient, and he somehow knew Antonio was sailing to the archipelago. He asked Theo if he would let such a suspicious person aboard his own ship. Theo grinned, pleased to have been seen through. He dropped the pretense and revealed a small, ornate coin. He knew Antonio was the leader of the Black Skull Resistance. He proposed a deal. Antonio demanded to know how he knew, but Theo replied that what he knew was far more important. For example, he knew about the dragon sword Antonio was so desperate for. Antonio flew into a rage, assuming Theo worked for Troyven. Theo calmly advised him to settle down, reminding him that composure was the basis of any deal. An aide, alerted by the noise, reminded Antonio of the same. Antonio reasoned that only a Troyven agent could know about the sword. But Theo then posed a question. What if he was the one who had it? Antonio called it absurd. Theo simply asked why it was absurd. He suggested that Troyven, like him, had probably only ever claimed to possess it. A terrible realization dawned on Antonio. Troyven had never actually shown them the real sword. Seeing he had nothing to lose, Antonio agreed to hear him out. Theo began to speak of the archipelago's mysteries. It all began with the hero, Kriemhild. Antonio opened a drawer, revealing he knew the story well. He confirmed that the fairy tale was real. The islands didn't float on mysterious currents. They were held aloft by the immense mana released by the sea dragon Kriemhild had sealed deep beneath the waves. The dragon sword was the device that maintained that seal and kept the mana stable. But ever since Troyven stole it, the currents had grown unstable. The archipelago was going to sink. It would fall back into the sea. This was no joke. The lives of his people were at stake. Antonio promised Theo anything if he would return the sword. Theo shook his head. Returning it was no solution, as he had no intention of giving up the sword forever. Antonio pressed on, offering any amount of money. But Theo didn't need money. He already had a plan to save the archipelago and keep the sword. All Antonio had to do was take him there. The resistance leader could only stare, utterly bewildered.